the big society up until now. You know, there's schools in my former constituency where they used to be able to have extended services, bringing in all sorts of people to give kids a range of experiences after school. Not able to happen now because the people responsible for doing them have been removed. The volunteering scheme, which has been cut, and therefore fewer people able to come forward and volunteer. The neighbourhood police teams that were actually engaging actively with communities, coming under threat because of 10,000 police officers going already. You can't have it both ways as a government.
Well, it's rich to hear Jacqui complaining about the cuts when these are made necessary by the appalling deficit. I make absolutely no apology. I make absolutely no apology for saying it, and I will carry on saying it. We inherited the biggest...
Wait a minute, you may not want to hear what Francis Maude has to say, but you must listen to him.
And I'll tell you precisely why I always say it, because it's always true. This last government left the biggest budget deficit in the developed world. Do you realise that the government, when we came into office, was spending £4 for every £3 it got in, having to borrow £1 every... Do you think it's all right for us just to leave that for our children and our grandchildren to pick up the bills for decades to come, for generations to come, because we didn't have the guts to deal with this appalling mess that Jacqui Smith's government
We'll have one at a time. No, don't shout out, and we'll have one speaker at a time, not only from the audience, but also from this panel.
Yeah.
Francis Maude, you've made your point about why the cuts were necessary in your view. Can you answer the question, which was about the effect on the voluntary sector? Was Elizabeth Hoodless right when she said it was being decimated by the cuts? Whatever the reason for the cuts, was she right to say it was going to damage the big society in that way?
She prefaced her remarks by saying that the big society was a great idea and she was excited by it and she supported it. Now, Ming is right that he says that, of course, there's a huge amount already gone. We've got a great tradition in this country of civil society organisations in every part of the country doing huge amounts of good stuff. But the big society, having a bigger, strong society, more cohesive, with more going on in every part of the country, is not just about voluntary activity. It's about pushing power away from the centre, putting power into local government, into communities. So
but is the voluntary sector going to be decimated? She's wrong on that.
Well, let me just finish, because part of the question was, is the whole concept of the big society damaged by this? And so I've got to start by saying that it isn't just about that. It's about decentralisation, pushing power into communities, so communities as well as citizens have more power to shape their lives and command their own destinies. It's also about public service reform, so that we do break, as Jacqui's own government started to do, break the public sector monopoly, so you have much more open provision. And of course that will itself provide lots of opportunity, and is already doing, for voluntary and charitable organisations and social enterprises to get revenue from the state to provide public services. Now, there's a gap at the moment because some councils, sadly, and I regret it, are actually cutting funding to local voluntary organisations, and I wish they would do what we're doing in central government, which is to squeeze our overhead costs, squeeze suppliers, get out of property that we don't need, stop the wasteful ICT projects, which is enabling us to save some £3.5 billion just in this financial year, because that will help to protect public sector jobs and protect the funding for voluntary organisations. So the big society, a bigger, stronger, more cohesive society, is incredibly important. We've had the big state for decades, and it's failed. We now need a bigger society.
Cliché, Francis.
It's also true,
where is
unfortunately.
The beef? David Cameron,
I'm a psychotherapist and I work for a voluntary organisation which is being highly threatened under the cuts that your government have brought in. You mentioned earlier that you were worried and concerned about people with mental health problems. Where and how are they going to be helped?
Well, just specifically on that point, it's just worth making the point that the National Health Service budget is actually being protected. Labour did not commit to protect it. Labour would have cut the budget to the National Health Service. For us, it's the priority, and we're protecting the budget.
OK. Douglas Murray.
I have to say, it's nice to see the people of Bristol have such fire in their belly for this question. But I have to say, I wouldn't like to see the household accounts of some of you who booed Francis Maude just now. I mean, it's not as it were debatable whether or not this country has run out of money. It's not as it were debatable whether or not the previous government maxed out all the credit cards. It's simply the fact.
It is.
And
It
if
is
you just look
debatable.
at the situation
It is
that this country is in economically, you'd realise that. There's no reason, as far as I understand it, neither the Liberal Democrats nor the Conservative Party are committed simply to punishing the people of this country or just love taking away health provisions or for people with psychiatric problems. The fact is that cuts are necessary and they have to become somewhere. Now, quickly, the big society is, I mean, it is a very vague concept to some of us. I'm not sure what it is myself. I don't know if David Cameron's sure, but as I understand it, it's something like the flip side of the small state, which people of my conservative persuasion are very keen on, which is that people shouldn't expect the state to provide them with everything. We've created a very strange and I think rather unpleasant thing in our society, which is that if anyone expects anything, they expect it from the state. It's led to a sort of moral obesity in this country. I was speaking to a politician recently
bring
who
your
said...
remarks to a close, because we're coming to the end of the programme. Mehdi Hasan.
On the big society,
Sorry.
I'm with Ming. I don't know what it means. I think the short form is BS. But on specifically
BSE,
on the specific issue of the big society itself and whether it's going to be damaged. I mean, you talk about true, and facts. It's undeniable that if you take £4.5 billion away from voluntary groups, the big society is going to be damaged. Let me mention to you very briefly a man named John Coventry, who works in St Austell in Cornwall. He's been running a homeless charity for the last 15 years, helping homeless people. He got a letter last Friday from the Conservative-led council in Cornwall saying you have 5 working days to cut your costs by 40%. Otherwise, we will withdraw all funding from you. 40% in 5 days.
All right.
Even if you agree with the cuts, how can you do it in that time frame?
Francis Maude.
You're not building a big society, Francis. You're shrinking it.
Francis Maude.
Well, I can't.
shrinking the state.
John Coventry's not the state. John Coventry's not the
Douglas,
state.
I asked Francis Maude, and we're almost at the end of the programme. Would you briefly respond to?
Well, I started by saying that I hope that councils across the country, and many of them doing this, are first of all, because actually every part, the local government and the voluntary and charitable sector have got to have some share in remedying the problems of the deficit we inherited.
As much as the bankers?
So I would hope that councils everywhere will do what we did, take out the overhead cost.
They are doing that, Francis.
Well, they're
the
not
most efficient part of the
I've
public
got to
sector.
tell you, I've
David
got to
Cameron's
tell you.
words, local government is the most efficient part of the
I've
public
got to
sector.
tell you,
On this
there is
constant refrain-
plenty of councils that
Francis,
haven't
on
done
this-
that.
on this
It can be done, and that's the first place the money should be taken from.
Francis, on this constant refrain about the economy, when you came into government, the economy was growing, borrowing was falling.
Come on,
You're
Jacqui.
kidding. You
The
can't
deficit-
Kidding.
Just
We've been through
Of
the
course
deepest
the
recession
deficit
since the
has to
war.
be- of course the
You
deficit
should be
has to
ashamed of
Can
yourself.
we-
Of course the deficit has to be reduced.
should be
but
ashamed
you are
of
going
yourself.
too far.
You left-
That's why even
You
Liberal
spent-
Democrats
you left
are
too far.
screaming.
You left us stuck in that.
Then, if that were true, then why was Africa Darling preparing a schedule of cuts?
We have to finish the programme. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 people who'd like to speak.
The big society.
Five people on the panel, all of whom are insulting each other at the same time. I don't know, perhaps we should go on after we've finished the programme, but I do have to stop because, as always, an hour's an hour for question time. We'll be taking Westminster Politics again to voters around the country next week. We're going to be in Barking. We're going to be in Newport the week after that. Our panel in Barking includes Vince Cable, Yvette Cooper, Michael Heseltine, and one of the country's most powerful businesswomen, Victoria Barnsley, who's the chief executive of Rupert Murdoch's publishing house, HarperCollins. So if you'd like to come either to Barking or Newport, the number to ring, as always, 0330 123 9988, or you can apply through the website, which the number's on the screen there. My thanks to you on the panel, all of you. I'm sorry we weren't able to go on for another half hour.
Just limbering up.
Just limbering up. And my thanks to all of you who came to take part here in Bristol. Until next Thursday, from Question Time, good night.